Ah, Helldivers. Just saying the name feels like I'm opening a dusty old box full of old memories. I started playing Helldivers about a week after it came out, and I only played for about 6 months, right up until they launched the squid enemies, or as they call them, the Illuminate, or something like that. Slaying hordes of bugs with my buddies felt like a fever dream. We created many cinematic moments, purchased all the available items in the shop, and threw 500-kilogram bombs on top of each other. It was amazing. Laughing until we couldn't breathe. It was great. The beautiful graphics, weapons, and enemies captivated millions of us, and the dream to save our planet with democracy. Until this game started getting unplayable. When the game first launched back in February of 2024, there were many major bugs, and not just the Terminids. This included server crashes and not getting payouts for missions, just to name a few. For a $40 game made by indie developers with hopes for the game to be fixed later on, this wasn't that big of a deal, is what I'd say if there wasn't dozens of issues with the game 2.5 years after release. First off, after coming back, something I realized immediately: everything is significantly harder. When I first started playing the game after a few months, I was able to run solo and occasionally win a Helldiver mission, the hardest game mode at the time. Now, with a full team, I'd be lucky to get a level 6 extreme mission done. As live service games age, they do tend to ramp up the challenge to keep veterans engaged, and to give credit where it's due, Arrowhead did a great thing by adding a tier even harder than the original cap. Difficulty 10, the Super Helldive. But a new difficulty tier doesn't explain why I can't even handle solo missions anymore. A lot of people attack this game, claiming that the updates have just nerfed the weapons into the dirt, but looking at the data, I'd have to disagree. After doing some digging through the patch history, there have actually been 690 weapon buffs compared to the only 200 nerfs. Does that mean their sandbox is perfectly balanced? No, absolutely not. We'll get into that in a minute. The real culprit behind why the game feels so unforgiving isn't the damage number, it's the bunch of major fundamental changes to how core gameplay mechanics has been affected. Playing the game by myself was one of my favorite parts of Helldivers. Don't get me wrong, I loved playing with other players, but once in a while, I just wanted to run it solo. It almost felt like a different game altogether. How solo dives worked before was when you went into a planet, there'd be a bunch of enemy squadrons. Going from 4 players to 1 player nearly cut the squadron size by about 83%, which made playing solo challenging but incredibly enjoyable when you snuck past a ton of enemies. And if they ever did end up seeing you, it wouldn't feel impossible to kill them all. It pretty much turned the game into a Spec Ops mission, leaving the map feeling somewhat empty but just the right amount of enemies to give veteran players a run for their money. But Arrowhead decided that stealth wasn't part of their chaotic, overwhelming vision for the game. They pushed a massive patch that changed patrol scaling from exponential to linear. Instead of enemies scaling down to a manageable 17% for a solo player, spawns were cranked up to a baseline of 25%, almost doubling the amount of enemies. Immediately, the player base felt the shift. The planet suddenly felt crowded beyond anything that felt intentional. Another major solo killer was the Hivemind patrol mechanic. For an example, with the 17% spawn rate, the patrols would wander around aimlessly in your area. It didn't feel like they were trying to find you. It just felt like a patrol walking around making sure nobody was around. Well, now they made it so when a patrol spawns, it will immediately go to intersect with your current general area. Because patrols were spawning so frequently, a new squad of enemies would spawn, automatically walk toward your location and trap you. The moment one enemy saw you, it triggered a flare or a bug breach, alerting the entire area's Hivemind to your location, making it a chaos horde, which was exactly what Arrowhead was looking for. This essentially made playing the game solo impossible for all players on any difficulty worth while. It also felt like they got rid of solo game mode because it completely got rid of the Spec Ops playstyle. This definitely threw me off coming back. Did you ever play like this before? Let me know down in the comments as I'll be reading all of your comments. Also, we recently crossed 1,000 subscribers on the channel, which is absolutely insane. So if you're enjoying this deep dive, consider hitting subscribe to help us clear our next milestone of 1,500 subscribers. Now, obviously, this isn't the only thing that's been affected since I left almost 2 years ago. Every game has its meta. When I was playing, it was these weapons, the Sickle, the Arc Thrower, and the P19 Redeemer, and closer to the end of my run, the Quasar Cannon was pretty fun as well. One would assume metas would flatten out with time, but this is absolutely not the case. Now, I don't know what the statistics were when the game first came out, but as of this video being posted, there's a secondary that has over 27% of players using it. For those still playing the game, you already know this weapon. It's the GP20 Ultimatum. For those who haven't played for a year or longer, it's pretty much a pocket nuke that can be used at any time to kill almost anything that you can get close enough to. To kind of broaden out this perspective a little bit, out of the 23 currently available secondary weapons, just 3 of them make up 57% of all player loadouts. How's that for weapon diversity? It's the exact same story for the throwables. Just 3 options out of the 20 that people are running with, and these make up 55% of what players bring to the field. And for primary weapons, the top 5 choices out of the massive list of 50 command 39% of the player base, leaving 25 weapons sitting at a literal less than 1% use rate. And this might leave you asking, well, that's just every game, so what's the big deal? Which begs the ultimate question, how does this stack up against a very similar game? Now let's take this other amazing co-op horde shooter with distinct classes, bugs, and objectives called Deep Rock Galactic. Pretty much identical fundamentals, and the gold standard for games like this, in my opinion. If you look at a weapon tier list for Deep Rock Galactic, it's incredibly hard to find an absolute consensus. There is no single sidearm commanding a 27% global pick rate, and there aren't 25 completely dead primary weapons sitting at a 0% usage rate. In fact, it might be the healthiest pick rate chart I've ever seen, with every weapon landing between 5% and 10% use rate. Why? Because Deep Rock doesn't balance weapons in a vacuum, they balance through specialized utility. In Deep Rock, your secondary isn't an emergency backup or a mandatory pocket nuke like Helldivers. It's kind of like a puzzle piece. Thanks to the game's overclock system, a single weapon can be heavily customized to change its behavior entirely. If you want a grenade launcher that acts like a tactical mini nuke, you can run the Fat Boy overclock, but the game doesn't force you to run it just to survive, because the game's difficulty doesn't rely on hyper-aggressive, omniscient Hivemind pathing. You are free to build an engineer who uses a plasma cutter for line clearing or a pocket shotgun built strictly for mobility. When every weapon has a highly distinct, viable identity, player choice naturally flattens the meta. You don't optimize the fun out of the game because the game doesn't punish you for experimenting. Arrowhead, on the other hand, designed a world where the gameplay mechanics are so brutally suffocating that the community had no choice but to hyper-optimize. When solo stealth was killed and patrols became heat-seeking missiles, players stopped picking weapons based on what was fun. They picked the GP20 Ultimatum because at difficulty 9 or 10, entering a planet without a pocket nuke is essentially throwing your game. And now it's not just the AI pathing that backed players into a corner, it's what Arrowhead did to the enemies themselves, actually. If you haven't played in a while, you might remember when dealing with basic enemies was actually fun. You brought a standard machine gun or assault rifle, tore through the front line, and saved your heavy stratagems for the big guys, and, well, not anymore. Arrowhead rolled out massive structural overhauls to enemy durability that completely broke the combat loop. Take the Hive Guards, for example. They used to have medium armor on their heads. Annoying? Sure. Manageable? Yeah. They've been buffed to heavy armor on their front, claws, and head, drastically dropping the pool of primary weapons that can even scratch them. Now here's the real hidden killer, the massive sweeping buffs to durable damage. Arrowhead quietly cranked up the durable damage stats for nearly the entire Terminid roster, from tiny scavengers and hunters all the way up to chargers and bile titans. What that translates to in-game is pure frustration. Your expensive stratagem centuries, your hard-earned exosuits, and your emplacements now get absolutely melted in seconds by basic low-tier bugs. The tools that were meant to give you a fighting chance against a horde are now doing absolutely nothing. And when you pair that with the new or reworked threats, like the absolute nightmare that is the Impaler, which can ragdoll you across the map from a mile away without you ever seeing it, the game stops feeling like a heroic, chaotic power fantasy. It feels tedious. You aren't fighting a war for democracy anymore. You're fighting against a spreadsheet of health pools and armor values that seem entirely designed to punish you for trying something outside of the meta. Speaking of meta again, the meta seems to change every 6 weeks when they add a new warbond, or curb stomp the strongest weapons with their new patch notes. As fine as it is to have a new meta changed every month or two, in this game it's a completely different story. If a new meta weapon comes out in the new warbond that you don't have, you need to either cough up $10 to get the warbond or spend 30 plus hours grinding through super credits to purchase it without spending money. This just makes the game pay to win. Even though it's already a $40 game, you should expect to pay another $10 every so often.
I like money.
It kind of feels like that when Arrowhead's running out of money, they just decide to make another $10 war bond that has the strongest weapon in it. And then once you purchase it, a month and a half later, they nerf the weapon into the ground and repeat the cycle over and over again to keep people playing and spending money. Lastly, I want to go over glitches. The glitches in Helldivers almost feels unique. Yes, other games have them, but absolutely not as long as Helldivers does. There are still menu and UI bugs that have been an issue since day one that haven't been addressed, mostly when it comes to the friends list showing that someone's permanently offline, even when they're not, and when party invitations just don't send at all. Another one that we've had since day one is an infinite loading screen glitch. When you're meant to drop down for the first time from your ship, the game would indefinitely show you the loading screen flying through the sky. The only way to get out of this is Alt F4 and then reboot the game. There are tons of other bugs that have come up along the years that are persistent to this day. It feels like Arrowhead is taking one step forward and then 2 steps back. Right before I left the game, there was a bug that when you shot the arc thrower, it just crashed the whole lobby. And another thing that I've heard a lot of complaints about is that with every patch comes a few frame drops, so over the years the frame rate has gone down significantly. This game is not meant for newer or returning players. Unless you're willing to buy a few war bonds on top of purchasing the game, don't mind persistent glitches and bugs, and can't use your favorite weapon because it's not part of the meta. As much as I'd like to recommend this game to people, it's just not the same as it was when it first came out. Almost everything that made this game fun and unique is gone or nerfed, and every part of the game that was bad is still there, like persistent glitches and the ever-changing pay-to-win metas. I think I'll be doing more videos going over similar games and gaming news soon. Who knows? Maybe I'll do a deep dive into Deep Rock Galactic. Let me know how you feel about how Helldivers 2 has changed for you over the past 2 years down in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say and the community has to say. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. It really helps support a channel like mine reach more viewers like you. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.